Right, for harness breeders Victoria and the breed to succeed, we're happy to be catching up with Dr. Hugh Cathels. Firstly, Hugh, welcome.
Thank you.
We're here in Cranbourne at your beautiful property. Before we get started, we're going to talk about foaling, if you like,
Yep.
and getting an understanding of foaling and probably refreshing a few people on some of the things we should know about and forget about. A little bit of the history of yourself for a start.
Well, my history was I was a very young agricultural student at Melbourne Uni, and my rugby mate was a guy called Laurie Arthur, whose brother was Neil Arthur, and grandfather was Bill Mackenzie, who trained trotters up at Moolameen in the Riverina. I went up there as a 16-year-old, and Neil said to me, "Huey, you're a rugby player, sit behind this horse." So I sat and was the pacemaker to Neil's two Oaks fillies, took off 200 metres too early and beat them both. And I'd never done slow work. That was my first experience with any horse doing fast work, and I loved it. So
And that was your first experience with horses, full stop?
Pretty much, yeah. Hadn't touched one before, and was an ag student, and was basically had the addiction straight away. Some 6 or 8 years later, after graduating from vet school, got my first job in Adelaide at a Globe Derby Park area, did a few harness racing trainers, and one of them said, "There's an old standardbred trotter here, trained by Dickie White, do you want to lease it?" So I leased it, learnt to drive, got my licence on him, and then won 2 races at Kadina and fought I was Stanley Dancer.
Thought you had the gift. So we put some pellets behind. We've got a couple of mares behind us, but the dog's happy enough to eat it. So that fueled the love, if you like, of the horses?
Well, yeah, it was funny because when I grew up, my family had nothing to do with horses, but I knew I wanted to be an equine reproductive vet in primary school. Where that came from, who would know? But I wrote essays in primary school, which my mum still has, saying Huey wants to be an equine vet, but he's never touched a horse. So yeah, I learned to train in Adelaide and through Neil Arthur. Probably the best way to learn to trade is because I did a lot of trainers. I learnt what not to do before I learnt what to do.
Yep.
And yeah, I just loved it. And I was a bit of a rugby player, so I knew a bit about athletics training. I think I knew a lot about athletics training. And I just got the bug, and over the next 45 years, I've probably trained 25 horses in my life. We've had a little bit of success and a lot of fun, and won races in every state of Australia except Western Australia, and sent one horse to the States and won half a dozen races over there. So yeah, had a lot of fun.
And you breed your own, and you've had one of the great bloodlines, if you like, of standardbreds?
Well, I was really lucky because in the really early days when I came back from South Australia, I spent a year travelling around the States and going to vet schools, but also harness racing properties. Went to Stanley Dancer's place, saw Guts get beaten by On the Road again in a couple of the big 3-year races over there. Learnt about how the Americans just lived on the tracks and were basically itinerant people taking horses from one track to the other, and went to the studs in the States. All the ones in Pennsylvania and New York, and had a good time. And when I came back to Australia, looked around where to get a job, and the first place that got a job was Central Victoria, and one of my first clients was Helen and Graham Head, and I told them I'd trained a horse in South Australia, so they said, "Well, train one of mine." And I looked in a paddock of about 20 unraced fillies, picked one. Her name was Gold Mistress, and she was lucky enough to win the Bendigo Oaks trial in her first start with me training. So
Wow.
I was sitting at that stage having had 7 starts for 3 wins and thought, how easy is this game? Didn't stay like that, but yeah.
And then that ended up being Gemfire Star Chaser, that
Well,
this
yeah,
great producing family.
Yeah, Gold Mistress was the mother of Gemfire, and then I got Gemfire's 3/4 sister, who was Star Chaser, so I trained both them, and they both ended up very, very good broodmares. Both left a number of Group 1 winners. I think they had 2 or 3 each, and both left prize money of their progeny of over $1 million. Gemfire won the Tatlow, which was in those days was a Group 1 for me, so I won the Tatlow and beat Noel Alexander, which he still thinks is the biggest fluke in the world, because we sat behind his good horse, hit the front 2 strides before the post and 1 stride after the post. His horse had fought back, it was in front, so we're only in front for 3 strides, but we won. I won my first Group 1 when I didn't know what I was doing.
Did that fuel your reproductive veterinary side of things?
I was already wanted to be reproductive vet. I ended up spending 30 years on the Mornington Peninsula doing just about all the thoroughbred studs on the Mornington Peninsula and West Gippsland. Probably did 400 mares a year for 40 years. And yeah, I loved it. So it didn't really fuel my love of reproduction, but because standardbreds are AI and you can do embryo transfers, it fueled my love of that, which you can't do in thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
So the thoroughbreds paid for this place, but the standardbreds paid for my mental health.
Do you enjoy the challenge of that with and especially how it has developed?
Oh, well, my last good horse was Commander Buzz. He was flushed out of Star Chaser when she was 24 and couldn't have carry foals anymore because she was very arthritic. I picked her up 7 days after, flushed her out of Star Chaser, picked him up with a pipette at day 7 after insemination, put him in a test tube, sent him up to Kath McIntosh, brought him back a month later in the surrogate mare, delivered him, gelded him, raced him, and he ran second in the big 3-year-old Group 1 race in Bathurst. So, you know, you get a pretty good kick out of that.
And it is cool, isn't it? Like, I mean, you know, taking the line from Brett Coffey, breeding is cool. Like, I mean, these are the things that are so cool. I've been lucky enough to see a few embryos prior to them being inseminated into a horse, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and, you know, you can look at a place like this. I put the first semen in Star Chaser and the foal was Safari. I did one of Greg Fusinato's and the foal was Waikiki Beach, who won 25 straight or something. You know, you get a hell of a buzz out of all that sort of stuff.
So even as a vet, like, and I mean, you've got a vested interest, if you like, in the industry, but as a vet, when those horses that you the only association you might have had is your hand up the backside and the straw being inseminated, but that you still get that ownership, if you like, kick out of those achievements.
Oh, absolutely, and even the thoroughbreds. I mean, you know, my biggest client, Bombora, they had a stallion called Jugar, so they had horses like Juggler and, you know, the really good Group 1 winners. Well, you get a hell of a kick out of having things to do with them and delivering the foal, and if a foal was sick, saying, oh, I kept Juggler alive when he was a foal and that sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, like it's a trip that we go on. I think sometimes a lot of people, we actually forget some of the parts of why we actually got into it.
As I said, I always loved it. I wanted to do it from when I was a kid. I used to sit up the back of primary school reading The Age because that had all the breeding in it, and I loved a couple of thoroughbred stallions which were different. There was a horse called Grey Ghost who was grey, and I used to like watching his progeny, things like that. And yeah, it's an addiction. And we've been lucky if I can make it my career as well and do pretty well out of it.
And you're still doing it today. You're actually still got mares in. You got a positive test already for this year.
Oh, well, I also got the idea that after a few trips to the States, wasn't really enamoured with the horsemanship of Americans. I think we're much better. And they race their horses as 2 and 3 year olds, and then they all go through the Lexington or Harrisburg used horse sales as late 3 year olds. Well, you can buy fantastic horses. I've got a trotting mare out there who won $250,000 American as a 2 and 3 year old, ran 154 as a 2 year old, and I paid $50,000 for her.
Yep.
Her mate out there chased home that good, I can't remember the name of the filly, but when that filly won the 2 year old world record at the Red Mile, my filly out there ran 4th to her and was 2nd to behind her the whole way.
Yeah.
Well, that's as good a breeding as anything in the world.
Yeah.
And because we're doing standard breeds, you can get the best frozen semen in the world, and your breeding's as good as anywhere, anywhere. You can basically go to the elite lot if you can train.
Well,
so,
I think you said there before you've got a Confederate. When one of your mares is in foal to Confederate, we're watching him this time last year in the Breeders' Crown, and you've already got a mare in foal to him that wouldn't happen in the thoroughbreds.
Yeah, and Just Believe's mother's been here, so that's what you can do, and that's one of the reasons. I've bred a few thoroughbreds too, but I mean my thoroughbreds run round at Bairnsdale, and hopefully my standard breds run round in Yonkers and Sweden.
Absolutely, right. So we've got a couple of mares here in the background. They will come up. If they don't, I'll get some footage of them before they go. These two mares are pretty heavy in foal. I think both are overdue.
They're both a couple of days overdue. Yeah. First of all, foaling is the cutting edge of producing a racehorse, obviously. And I think the days of amateur foaling, purely on an economic, but also mainly on a welfare issue, are gone. It's got to be done professionally. You've got to have a foaling alarm, and you've got to know what to do when the foaling alarm goes off. Too many people wake up in the morning, the mare's been trying to foal all night, the mare's knocked about, the foal's dead. It's a big job to get the dead foal out because it's more difficult to get out because the mare's swollen and dry. And usually you damage the cervix doing it, and the mare never breeds again. Yeah. So you've got a disaster.
Yeah.
So
what could be seen as economically, an investment in some parts, some people might say it's an expense that they don't need, but it's actually could save them so much more money.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you have a foaling disaster like that, you've got no mare and no foal.
Yeah.
80% of the time, mares will foal perfectly okay on their own, and the foal will drink on its own. 20% of the time, you've got a disaster.
Yeah.
Because you've got to remember, these guys aren't cows, they're horses. They're bred for athletic performance and not on reproductive performance. So whereas 95% of cows will have a calf easily on their own.
Because they're bred to be reproducers.
Because they're bred to be reproductively efficient.
Love that.
And if they aren't, they get culled. These guys, if the mare's a crazy 2-year-old filly, she'll still get bred from.
Yeah.
So she probably won't be as good a mother. She may reject a foal, which a cow won't. And that's why these guys have got to be looked after. And if it costs you $500, $1,000 to get a foal out at a professional place,
it's still cheap money.
It's still cheap money.
That's actually, I love doing interviews with, you and I have been chatting for probably the best part of an hour prior to this, but that is actually the greatest example. People say they foal in the wild and go from there. But the horses that foal in the wild are not race horses, they're not athletes, they're not designed to go fast, they're actually a horse that's, a wild beast. As you say, these are horses here are equine athletes, and we're trying to breed an equine athlete out of them.
Absolutely. They're not selected for reproduction, so their reproduction efficiency has fallen over hundreds of years.
So it is getting, not, I won't say worse, but it's not as good as well, we say cows, but I would imagine certain breeds of horses as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a natural selection.
Just on that, is there much difference between a thoroughbred and a standardbred mare?
Well, there certainly is in temperament. Standardbreds tend to be better mothers. They also tend to be more violent mothers, and they'll look after their foals more, and they're more dangerous to humans. There's a percentage of standardbred mares for just attack you if you go near their foals, which you just about never see in thoroughbreds. But there's also a less percentage of standardbreds who will reject their foals, whereas maiden thoroughbreds can be a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll try and kill their foals and what's this, I don't want anything to do with it. So yes, there's a different temperament. I don't think there's much difference in the actual foaling process, but they're both selected for athletic performance and not reproduction, so they've both got their problems.
It's a really interesting insight, and it's quite funny that the standardbred mare would be noted as being a more placid mare to be around, yet they're actually more violent. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's that mare out there, Sahara Miss, with her foal. She's an older mare that's been a very, very good brood mare, but I wouldn't ask my my vet nurse to walk in there and catch her, because she'd probably try and bite her.
We're going to be in there in a minute doing some video footage.
We'll probably get attacked.
Right, these two mares back here, overdue. Where are they at? Like, how long is the gestation for?
Well, I work on the gestation, and it's written in the textbooks, 11 months and 1 week. What they don't say in the textbooks is plus or minus a month. I've had mares that have gone to the 13th month and still given birth to a perfectly healthy foal. It's not ideal, but it happens. So they tend to be about 11 months and 1 week. As a rule, early in the season, it'll be longer than that, and later in the season, it'll be shorter than that. So
and is that climatic?
It's due to day length, yeah. And the pineal gland. So as a rule, early foals foal late, late foals foal early.
Yeah.
So you've got to be aware of that. But both those mares are a couple of days overdue. The bay one is a maiden. It's almost impossible to tell when a maiden's going to foal by the signs of foaling. Gestation length, but then you look for udder development, wax on the teats, which are little bits of crystals on the end of a nipple, slack vulva, and usually the day before they're going to foal that night, they get up and down and they're really uncomfortable and those sort of things. In an older mare like that other mare, Winehouse, who is one of mine, you usually can tell, but the maidens can trick you all the time. So, even if you're not going to have a foaling alarm on an experienced mare, you've got to have a foaling alarm on a maiden, because you just don't know when they're going to foal.
Are they true to form? Horses, so Wineglass. Do you know that Winehouse? So do you know that she'll go? Traditionally a week over, do they?
She's usually pretty much on track. I think she was due yesterday. I think she'll probably foal in the next day or two. Yeah, she's pretty good.
So they are a little bit predictable, or
they're a lot predictable, but you can never rely on it.
No. That's actually cool. Preparation. I think a lot of people believe that horses foal down, and that as long as you've got them in good condition. Do you try to monitor weight and look at horses, especially a maiden mare? I would imagine the other mare, you know her, you know where she's at most of the time, but do you try to have them at an ideal weight?
Absolutely. We feed them pretty well. Plenty of calcium, so plenty of lucerne hay. We use a pellet mix, and we feed all the wet or foaling mares and wet mares, whereas the dry mares are out here and they're eating grass and good quality hay all the time. We obviously feed the wet mares. It's mandatory with thoroughbreds. In some conditions, you don't have to do it with standardbreds because standardbreds are much better doers. And overweight is probably nearly as much problem as underweight. But yes, it's good to have, obviously, a good plan of nutrition and the horses being in good nick.
Change their diets the closer they get to foaling?
We don't overly.
Yep.
Because we use a pellet mix and chaff and lucerne hay, and we vary the amount compared to their body condition, but we don't vary the makeup of the diet because we're pretty happy with it.
Just a little bit off track, well, not really, but I mean, you've been a vet for around a lot of the areas and a lot of places around the world.
Many years.
In that part as well, climate does change things as well a little bit.
Absolutely. You go to north of the divide, mares tend to do very well early in the season and cycle well early, but drop off in the later months because if you go to obviously north of Shepparton, it's much drier in summer.
And hotter.
Down here, they cycle, especially the dry mares cycle slower early in the season. Like now, we still have a few that aren't cycling properly because it's still too early. But they will cycle really, really well till after Christmas because we still have green grass after Christmas. So,
is it the green grass or the climate that
both?
Yep. I suppose they go hand in hand in a way, don't they?
Absolutely. And if you go to the Hunter Valley in December and try and get a mare in foal, I mean, it's a desert. So it's really hard.
Does it, with the foaling, is it sort of almost the same logic as that as well, that you don't want to foal in January in Bendigo, whereas a foal, you can have a foal in January in Ballarat? If that makes sense, does that help a little bit? Like nature takes over a little bit there with some of the mares?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The only thing is that a lot of the Shepparton and Bendigo areas are irrigated, and that obviously changes things.
Yep.
That's our feed being turned up.
So that does change a few other things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rightio. So these guys are foaling. You put the foaling alarm on them. One of the great misconceptions, I think, is that a mare will only foal over night time, so you pretty much have your days to yourself. That's a myth?
Only partly. It is pretty true. I can't remember we only foal down my mares here. We don't do it for outside people, but I can't remember the last one that foaled during the day. The vast majority of mares foal at night and usually in the early hours of the morning, so 3-4 o'clock. Now, there's a reason for that. Obviously, when these guys were grazing animals in the wild, that's when the predators were less likely to get them, and if they foal at 2 or 3 in the morning, 4 hours later they were up and ready to follow their mother. They could walk away from their placenta so the predators couldn't find them. In actual fact, and it's probably more standardbreds than thoroughbreds, the natural thing for quite a lot of mares is for them to eat their placenta, and they do that. Obviously, it's a adaptation so the predators can't find it. But yeah, if they foal at 2 o'clock in the morning, by 6 o'clock in the morning when daylight starts, they're up following the mother, and hopefully they can
outrun the lions.
Not get eaten by a lion. Yeah,
that's actually pretty cool, and the interesting part about the placenta there with them eating it as well. Because a lot of people would say, oh, there's something wrong with this mare by doing it. It's perfectly natural.
Probably means they're more adapted to reproduction than one that doesn't.
So we've got our foaling alarm on. Again, it is a really good tool, but it is not foolproof. You still need to be able to check them. You said there before about wax. And that. Is there any other telltale signs that we should be looking for?
The day before they foal, the daylight before they foal, if you're an experienced stud person, you can almost bet that they're going to foal that night because they're not wanting to eat much, they're lying down a lot and getting up and being uncomfortable.
So their diet does change. When I say their diet change, their I suppose their habits.
Their behaviour changes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Now, that doesn't often happen with maidens, so they're the ones you've got to really.
And is that just simply they don't know what's going on?
They don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
They've got sore guts. They feel like they want to foal, but they never experienced that feeling before, so they don't know to do it.
Yeah. Does that get back to a little bit like I was saying to you before with the other mare, Waineau? You know what she'll do, you know when she'll go, but she also knows what to do. Is that how it sort of works?
Well, I've still had the alarm on both those ones for a week, so I've had no sleep for a week. But I've told my wife they're not going to foal tonight, but that doesn't say you don't put the alarm on.
Yeah, and go. And you're a huge advocate for alarms, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a number of types. There's the ones that just go off when the horse lies on its side, and there's also a foaling app, which we used previously. We were pretty disappointed with that this year because all of a sudden they said the app's offline for a month. So we had to buy foaling alarms again. I was pretty disappointed in that. I think the app was good, but they had a few problems with the computer setup. So we went back to just the straight foaling alarms, which we'd used previously before the app happened, and their magic breed, I can say that. They were very, very good to us, and they've worked great. I haven't had a full night's sleep for a week, and I've been woken up at least 6 times a night for the last week.
And it is one of those things, and I can say this from experience, when you are the husband and you're in bed and you hear what appears to be a fire alarm, you bolt upright for the first time, because Marie forgot to tell me that she put the alarm on the mare. It's not the greatest experience that first night, is it?
No, and especially these two, because my bedroom's there and they like lying down just here.
Yep.
So I can almost open the window and yell at them, and they'll get up and the alarm will stop going off.
Some of the other signs, or signs that you might be having troubles?
Okay, well, basically a normal foaling, and don't quote me for these times, but they happen. From the first time of contraction, you should have a live foal within about 30 to 40 minutes.
Can I see the contraction?
You can see the mare lying down and straining, yes. Yep. Now, very soon after the first contraction, you will see a few membranes at the entrance to the vulva. Within about 15 or 20 minutes of that, you should see one leg, and then hopefully the other leg just slightly back. And 5 minutes after that, you should see the head. And after that, 5 minutes later, you should have a foal on the ground. Now, if you're an experienced studman, as soon as you see the membranes, or even before you see the membranes, it is a good idea to check that you've got 2 legs and a head coming. You can be a little bit fooled because often they come on their side so that the foal's not coming out the right direction. Normal foaling, the foal twists as it comes out. So when you put your hand in there, you'll find the legs are on one side, and as she contracts, that spins and come out, almost to the stage of being the foal upside down at the start. That's no big deal. And if you have to pull one, you can cross their legs to twist them into the normal presentation. But it's absolutely mandatory that the foal comes out 2 legs, head. I'll quickly go through the male presentations you get. Yep. The most common one is front legs back. Probably 80% of the time with front legs back, it's because the foal's got contracted tendons and can't straighten its legs.
So can I ask one question before you go too far there? Is that from the knees back, or is it shoulders back?
No, knees.
Yep.
It's usually knees, and if you do get that foal out, often dead, you'll find that you can't straighten the knees, and they'll be at 45 they'll be at 90 degrees, and you can't get them any straighter.
So no matter what, even if you...
Well, that's a dead foal to start with.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
To get that foal out, if it's not a maiden, you can sometimes pull them out with the legs still flexed. If it's a maiden, that's impossible, and basically the only way to keep the mare in one piece is to do a Caesar. Now, these days, caesareans are very, very successful. But it is very difficult to get a foal out with contracted tendons and flexed knees if it's a maiden.
Yeah.
The other common occurrence is head back. Usually with the mare standing, you can tranquilise her, push the foal back a bit and straighten the head up and get it out as a normal foaling. Other more unusual but bad presentations are breech birth with the back legs coming first. Unusual, you can usually pull them out. And the worst presentation is stifle lock, where the foal's normal presentation front end, but the stifles are flexed and jammed up in the pelvis. Now, you cannot pull that out. The only way to get that out is to tranquilise the mare or anaesthetise the mare and hoist her and push the foal back and then pull the foal out. But it is also almost impossible to diagnose. So most of them are seizures as well.
So that will present normal in a way.
Well, normal till the foal gets out to the chest size and won't come any further. And if you keep pulling, you'll just have an absolute disaster.
So again, you can save the mare if you have, especially if you have a foaling alarm on and you're there.
Sometimes.
Yeah. But you heighten your chances by being there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
And the bottom line is, if you've got a bad foaling and if you have to really forcibly get a foal out, you will inevitably rip the cervix and she will then forever onwards have difficulty breeding.
Yep.
So basically, if your mare's worth anything and you've got a reasonably bad foaling and your vet says this is in a lot of trouble, if you try and do fetotomies like they do in calves and all that sort of thing, a mare's cervix is very delicate, and if you damage it, you have not got a breeding proposition afterwards. So more and more mares, especially the top end, are going to Caesar. If you go to Caesar, even if you get a dead foal out, the chances are you're going to have a mare that will breed well in the future.
So it's not the end of the road?
It's not the end of the road. In fact, a caesarean is very much, even with a dead foal, in both cases, a caesarean is very much preferential to a traumatic pulling.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something you should all really look at, because if you damage the cervix, you haven't got a mare.
Well, it's one of those things I haven't spoken a lot about. I've done quite a few of these, and a lot of people don't talk about it. So it's obviously something that's developed in recent years, and they're getting more and more competent as they go along.
Yeah, I mean, I did my first Caesar in the paddock 30 years ago. It did live, but I was lucky. I wouldn't do it in the paddock now.
Yep.
If a mare's not worth going to a surgery and doing properly, you probably euthanize it.
Yep.
Because, I mean, a mare that's got a damaged cervix is no longer an economic proposition.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Spend the money, save the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and go from there. Other issues?
Well, other issues, certainly with mares, why don't they foal properly? Obviously, the first thing is malpresentation of a foal. So, as I said, contracted tendons and knees coming and not feet is the most common. But other things, mares can have a lot of traumatic problems during foaling, which you are not aware right from the start, like a split, a tear in the uterus, and the mare just stands there and doesn't contract. They can have damaged and split guts like cecum, and they sit there, gradually get a temperature and, or not gradually, rapidly get a temperature and die. They can have broken pelvises from foaling, all those things which are absolute emergencies. In a lot of cases, especially a ruptured cecum, the mare is going to die.
Yep.
So if your vet gets there quick enough and there's a good vet, they can anaesthetise the mare, basically do a Caesar and pull a live foal out, and then put the mare down, and you can foster the foal and have a product at the end.
Yep.
But you've got to recognise those things first. So they're common things. The other obviously common thing is an oversized foal in a maiden mare. the professional studs do almost always, if it's a normal presentation, almost always get them out successfully.
Yep.
And I suppose the third thing we should talk about is the red bag delivery.
Yep.
Red bag is when the placenta's coming out, the first bits of membrane are coming out, it's thick and red. Now that happens when there is placental separation. Now, the placenta is the bag that the foal is in the uterus of the mare, and it is how the foal gets its nutrition, but mainly gets its oxygen. So if you get a red bag delivery, basically the foal is not getting oxygen because the placenta has separated off the uterus. So that's an absolute emergency. If you see a red bag, you have to get the foal out in 10 minutes.
Yep.
So your
priority is get the foal out.
Yeah, you just yank, and then he can breathe on his own and he doesn't need the placenta.
Yep.
If you don't get him out quick enough, the first stage is you get what they call a dummy foal, and the second stage is you get a dead foal.
Yep.
So it's got to be quick. My trotting mare over there, Naughty, she had a red bag delivery last year. We got him out quickly. He had a few problems in that he was, had a condition called dysphagia, in that his larynx wasn't working properly and he couldn't swallow milk, but he grew out of that after intensive care, and he's an absolute bottler.
Yeah.
But you've got to get them out. Now, dummy foals are interesting because basically they're foals that have had not enough oxygen in the birth process. Now, whether that's a prolonged birth process due to a mare not pushing hard enough, she may be a maiden, she may have a problem like a ruptured uterus or a ruptured cecum or a fractured pelvis, or she may be a red bag, but you've basically got a dummy foal. Now, dummy foal just means he doesn't know what he's doing, and maybe just he's a bit stupid and doesn't know how to latch onto the teat, to the point where a bad dummy won't even be able to get up, and a reasonably bad dummy will walk around a stable, put his head in the corner, and some of them even make a barking noise like a dog. Now, the treatment for a lot of treatments have been tried for dummy foals. They've tried DMSO drips and all sorts of things. Basically, if you can keep the nutrition up to the foal, most times the brain will recover well enough to be an athlete. You don't have to be real intelligent to be an athlete anyway. Look at the Olympics, but that's another story. But if you can keep a dummy foal going, he nearly always will become an athlete if you keep him healthy.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, and that's one of those things, and I think a lot of people have seen the foals that are trying to suck on the timber or whatever's in the boxes and things like that. It doesn't mean that they're going to be stupid for the rest of their life.
Certainly not a death sentence. No. I mean, the most graphic one we had was one of my thoroughbred studs where the people were really, really competent and really, really competent at looking after stomach tubing foals, and they had we had a bad dummy foal there. Took about 3 days to get up. We kept stomach tubing it with milk. We kept it alive and going. And as a yearling, he got sold through the yearling sales, but his name was Steady Eddie. And he actually raced. I'm not sure if he raced successfully, but that was a foal that was a bad dummy that we kept going. That had
for 3 days.
3 days before it got up. Yeah. Purely due to anoxia during birth. Oh. So it was pretty spectacular.
Right, we're going to move paddocks.
Okay.
Right, Hugh, we've moved paddocks. We actually have the mare and foal behind, and you're going to actually say who the mare is for a few of the trotting people.
Okay, well, this is a pacing mare called Sahara Miss. She's actually the mother of or grandmother of all the Saharas. I think her last yearling went through the sales.
100,000
last year. It was the second highest pacer, I think, and the highest pacer was out of her daughter.
And I'll just correct myself there, Sen. because there was 2 went through out of those same families. One went for 100 and the other one went a little bit higher. I can't remember exactly what it was.
This was the lower one of the two.
Yep.
The other mare was very interesting because her name's Sahara Breeze, maybe.
Yep.
And she's the only mare in 300 or 400 mares a year for 45 years that I have ever seen which does not produce 1 drop of milk.
Prior to foaling?
After foaling, ever. So she foals and just doesn't produce milk. So every one of Sahara, I think, Breeze's foals has to be raised either with a surrogate mare or on a bottle.
Is that common?
It's the only mare I've ever seen. A lot of people say my mare hasn't got enough milk. You go out there and it's a skinny maiden that looks like it doesn't produce much milk. I don't think I have ever seen a mare not produce enough milk for the foal to survive. You see mares that don't produce enough milk for the foal to thrive, but pretty much they always produce enough mares to survive. Sahara Breeze doesn't produce any milk whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. And the first time I saw her, which was her second foal, I told the person foaling her down, that condition doesn't exist, there's something wrong here, we'll just do it normally. And boy was I wrong.
They keep throwing things up. Right, we'll just turn you this way a touch.
Sorry, mate,
no, you're
sorry.
all right. Come back over here. Don't let it step out of the camera. Well, I've got to keep you going.
Well, that was my best side anyway.
Right, so you get your successful foal. So we got our foal. If it's a dummy foal, we've managed
We
it.
treat it, yep.
What are some of the other things, though? Like you just said, then a mare with no milk.
Probably the other thing we should talk about first is the immune status of a foal. Now, foals are unusual, horses are unusual in that all the immunity to a newborn comes through the colostrum, the first milk. No immunity pretty much goes across the placenta. That is unusual, almost unique, because most humans, cows, all get immunity across the placenta, but horses don't. It's an adaptation which is probably not good, and how we monitor it is that at about 36 hours of age we can take a blood test and test the immunity of the foal. Now, if you're going to insure a foal, the insurance companies insist on having a 800 level immunity at 36 hours or they won't insure it. That's how important it is. And the amount of immunity is purely on how much good quality colostrum the foal drinks. So if the milk is a maiden and is watery without much bulk in it, you will have a low immunity. If the foal is a dummy or slow, or the mare is a maiden and doesn't let the foal drink initially, the foal will have a low immunity. And if the mare runs milk before foaling, so that the colostrum disappears and normal milk appears at the time of foaling, the foal will have a low immunity. Generally speaking, with a low immunity, especially if there's a number of foals on the property, that is a really, really bad thing, because the foal will not be able to fight off any disease it could get. It's easy to monitor.
So just on that, so if you have one foal, and you only going to have one foal on the property, and you might only have one mare and one foal, you still want that immunity up, but it is not as bad as what it is if it is on a place where there is a lot of other foals and a lot of other horses around.
Absolutely, because if you've got a horse population, you've obviously got other diseases in foals, which the foals with good immunity can fight off, like rotavirus, like pneumonia,
No, I think
like
that's
scours.
Yeah.
And if you've got an isolated foal on a isolated property, it obviously can't get the contagious diseases because it's got no other foals to get them off.
Yep.
Even so, I mean, if you've got a cut leg and you're lower immunity, you're going to have more trouble fighting it off. So the IgG level is very important.
Yep.
Now, if you do a 36-hour test, which I would encourage every person with a foal to do, costs about $100. Fairly simple blood test, or there's a snap test, you can do it with a kit. I think it is very worth doing. Certainly I do all my foals at 36 hours, and if I find they have a low immunity, there is a serum bank, which is a litre of frozen serum, which you can run into the foal, boost its immunity, pat it on the bottom, and say, "You're right now, mate."
Yep. It's quite simple.
It's simple.
Yep.
It's pretty much foolhardy, and nothing much ever happens. And it is just a great tool which has been around in probably, I'm guessing, 15 years. In the old days, we had to collect serum from mares, spin it down and make our own serum bank. Or the other thing is, if you've got a mare that runs milk, you can supplement the foal in the first 24 hours with another mare's colostrum and boost it up. Again, that's not foolhardy.
So just on that, so if you say, right, we just leave things to nature, the foal gets up and you see it have a suck straight away, you say, right, it's got all of its colostrum. That's actually not the case, is it? There's so many ways that they can miss that most important first drink. Some mares it will be the case, but others it's not the case.
Oh, most mares it is the case, but it doesn't take into account the dummy foal that looks like it's sucking but it's not, and,
Yep.
and the milk's running on the ground. Doesn't take into account the mare who produces watery milk that doesn't have IgG in it, and it doesn't take into account the mare that's run milk pre-foaling and has run out of immunity in the milk.
Yep.
So there's a number of factors that may cause a low IgG.
Yep. That IgG test is the most important thing you think?
You've got to get the foal out alive first, but
Yep.
yes, it's the things that we look at, obviously, the foal out alive, the foal up and drinking it at 4 or 6 hours, and then the next day make sure it's pooing okay. We'll talk about
Yep.
meconiums if you like, but yeah, the IgG, I think these days I would do it with every foal. We encourage every foal to get an IgG done, and I think it is a very, very worthwhile tool.
Well, it doesn't matter if you go to a $2,000 service fee or if you go to a $200,000 service fee. $100 is nothing compared, because it's an investment either way.
Well, $100 in a 4-year-old racehorse is nothing.
Yep, and sorry to all the blood test people that might be saying, no, we charge 120. Well, that's okay. You can charge 120. We won't hold everyone to that price. You just said then before about meconium and pooing. You get your foal up, you're sucking, you've done your test. Is that it? We walk away and forget about them?
No, absolutely not. You've got to monitor the foal and make sure it continues to drink. First of all, you make sure that the maiden mare's mothered it okay, and there's all sorts of problems with that. You may have to twitch the mare, you may have to hold the mare, you may have to tranquilise the mare, you may have to pat the mare, but it's obviously mandatory that the foal drinks. When he's 24 hours old and he's running around mum and he's happy, yes, IgG's the next thing. But the percentage of foals that don't have passed their meconium, which is their first manure, is reasonably high. It tends to be higher in colts than fillies, and it tends to be higher in mares that are in poor condition. So the foal's first manure is not as sloppy as it should be. Now, a retained meconium is life-threatening. It's a colic. The foal will stop drinking at 12 to 24 hours, which is pretty traumatic in itself. But but then you've got to diagnose it, but then you've got to fix it. Generally speaking, if you're doing a lot of reproduction as a veterinarian, you can get the meconium out. You can use enemas of various types. There's soapy water enemas, there's human enemas, and you can give them various paraffin oil by stomach tube, all those sort of things. And generally speaking, I'd have to say I in 40 years I've only ever had to refer, I can't remember any to be honest, but a lot do get referred, and not often, but sometimes surgeons will open them up, squeeze the meconium out, and then stitch the foal up again.
Yep.
That is the absolute worst scenario. But they get over it pretty well.
And just back to the enemas, you can buy those. Like if you're not near a vet clinic, you can go to the chemist and you can get the human ones, and they do work the same way.
Human ones are the ones we use anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get those and use them. Telltale signs, if a horse hasn't passed a meconium.
Well, one, you won't see any shit, but two, he will be straining, and as it goes on, he will get very colicky, lying on the ground, rolling, and a retained meconium is probably 95% of newborn foals' colics are retained meconium.
One thing you've got to be careful of, because you'll keep going looking like he's having a drink, or they will keep going and think they're having a drink. You've got to be monitor that they are actually drinking if you're not sure.
Yep, absolutely. And an experienced stud person will check for meconium. Now, if you put a glove on, shove your finger up their rectum, and you get a pasty yellow manure out, you know that the meconium's out. If you put your finger up there and you get a dark brown black ball on the end of your finger, you know the meconium's not out, and the vet will have to do something about it.
It's actually quite this is going to sound silly in a way. It's quite a unique thing. It's pretty cool to sort of witness it, because it is they're rock hard. Like a lot of them can be so rock hard. You see them on the ground, you're like, what is that? But then the next couple of poos that they have are back to normal. It's quite a unique part of nature, isn't it?
Yeah, and look at that as a stud vet. When you see the first foal shit, which is light yellow and pretty sloppy, you go, hooray!
Yeah. Well, it is one, and I think sometimes when you're sitting there watching your mare and you see the foal pass, as it's getting you're also very happy because it's quite a relief that it's happened.
Well, more relief for the foal. I'll give you the tip.
Okay, so we've got our foal up. Our IgG is good. It's past its first meconium. Just walk away now and just
drinking well. Well, there are other problems that happen, but basically, if all those things are okay and the foal's now 36 hours old, drinking, doing well, you're pretty much okay.
The rest of it you can deal with as long as you keep monitoring these horses.
There's obviously a lot of other post-foaling complications that can be disastrous. Things like ruptured tendons in back legs, and the foal has trouble getting up, and it's obviously got a problem there. You can have all the flexural limb problems like contracted tendons that weren't that bad, so you can get them out, but their knees or their back end is so flexed that they can't stand up. You can have foals with very badly deviated legs, which with casts and things you can usually fix. You have other foals with very slack tendons, so they walk on the back of their fetlocks, which you have to box and sometimes put casts on. So you have foals that have diarrhoea within the first 24 hours, which can be disastrous, but basically the treatment's fluids. There's a whole lot of other things that obviously can be bad for a newborn foal. I mean, that one I said that was a dummy foal, which was out of Naughty. it was interesting because when we got it out very quickly, with the help of my son from that room up there, we got him out very quickly, even though he was a red blag. He was up within an hour and walking around and nuzzling at the udder, and we thought, oh, how good's this? We're fantastic. That was 4 o'clock in the morning. I had another look at him at 7 o'clock in the morning, and there's milk all around the mare and coming out his nostrils. So you immediately think, oh, we've got a cleft palate, that's the end of him. But I had a look at it and I couldn't see his cleft palate. So I'm thinking, what's going on? He actually had a thing called the dysphagia, which is a paralysis of the larynx. So he was, if you like, a roarer right at the start. And again, that's an absolute emergency because the milk just goes straight down on the lungs and they die very quickly of a pneumonia. So I referred him to our local equine hospital, who put him on fluids via IV and a stomach tube so that he didn't have to absolutely drink. And it took about 7 days for his dysphagia to slowly resolve. The specialist there initially said that it won't resolve, that's going to be the end of him. But luckily for me, it did resolve, and he's grown up into a beautiful big yearling, and I've scoped him and he's got no problems with his larynx now.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
So yeah, it resolved. You see a number of foals for the newborn that drink and milk comes out their nose. It's sometimes a soft palate, which is surgery or a death sentence, but it's often a partial dysphagia, and usually within a day or so they get over it.
It can right itself.
It rights itself.
Yeah.
But in this case it was a severe one and it wasn't going to right itself, but veterinary intervention was successful.
Well, just on that, and talking there with the mares before they're foaled, as they're foaling, the foal on the ground, vets get a bad rap. Full stop. I'm not here to get a cheap veterinary bill from anyone or things along those lines. It's been very, very expensive. And when you take a racehorse to them and you're dealing with a valuable animal, there are so many other things. A lot of what you've spoken about here today is actually cheap, and in as far as, like, we're talking enemas, a lot of it's just the person's time, like the time you put in there, and being able to ring vets and sort things out. If you're going to breed a foal, having a great relationship with your vet is so key to having a successful foal, is it not?
Oh, in my opinion, it's absolutely mandatory.
Yeah.
Even my best client, thoroughbred stud on the peninsula, who I've done the guy's work for 40 years and is one of my best mates, still rings me up for advice, and I've probably got 4 or 5 reasonably experienced reproductive vets around here who still ring me up for questions. Absolutely mandatory. To the point where, I mean, I've been doing it for 45 years. I'm really old and now retired. But I've got it, well, certainly one very prominent vet in the UK, one very prominent vet in the States, and probably Angus McKinnon as well, that I ring up for advice now.
Yep.
Because, I mean, no one's seen it all. If you talk to a human paediatrician, and my sister is one of the prominent ones in Melbourne, they ring each other up all the time. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, to keep learning and keep it. Yeah,
absolutely.
And this myth about just leaving them in nature and what would they do in nature, it is, you debunk that straight away, because you said that they are now an athlete. We are breeding athletes, we're not breeding broodmares. We're actually breeding athletes to raise athletes.
Yeah, and look, if you looked at the zebra population in Africa, they're not athletes, but their survival rate of their foals is probably, I'm guessing, 60 to 80%, maybe less. If you add the athletic side to it, your survival rate's probably 50%.
Yeah.
And who wants to breed horses 50% survival rate?
Yeah.
If you have to spend a little money, spend a little money. If you don't want to spend a little money, don't breed.
Yep. Yeah, and be aware of it. And that's, I mean, this breed to succeed. We are breeding to succeed. We want people. Don't take another step. I reckon you're almost out of the camera shot. You're going to come this way a bit for me. We want people to breed healthy foals, beautiful foals like this horse here is. That hopefully for the connections can go to sales and makes good money for them, or goes to races and continues to race. I'm not sure if it's a colt or a filly. It's a colt. But so we want to raise a good healthy foal, straight legs and everything else, going from there. And as our breeding crop numbers drop, and they drop considerably, we want to make sure that people can maximise that return on the ones that they are getting in foal, putting the money into it and getting the right result.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my whole career, whether reproduction or stable work, is to maximise racing results. I mean, that's why we do it. We want to win races, and we want to win the best races we possibly can. So 1, look after your mare, 2, look after your foal, 3, look after your yearling, and 4, look after your racehorse.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science. That's what me as a veterinarian's job has always been. I was crazy enough to train a few myself and have a few winners, but I love it.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. And to be honest, it's been reasonably economically viable.
to the other part, I suppose, what I said with Jess, and you will have that same part, there is nothing better, Jess Tubbs, that was the other day, than seeing a foal on the ground, whether you've had to pull it out or you've just been lucky enough just to witness it be born, to watch it go across the line winning a race. There is no better feeling, I don't think, anyway. I think it's, with the whole racehorse, I've never won a Group 1 race or an Inter-Dominion or any of those things, but just to see, your horse succeed, you sit up there, you read the stallion guide, you'll flick through what stallions you're going to send to your horse, you're scratching your head. We undersell it a little bit of one of the great experiences we're able to experience in this whole process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, picking an embryo up in a pipette, putting it in a test tube, delivering the foal, training the foal, and coming second in a Group 1 in Bathurst could only be better if a bloody figure won it.
But you do go home proud, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that particular race, a horse from Kath McIntosh has won it. And she was nearly as excited about my horse because she'd picked the embryo and put it in a surrogate. I reckon I did all the work, but that's another story. She was nearly excited as that as breeding the horse that won the race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you get a real buzz out of it.
And it's legitimate excitement, and Kath wouldn't have owned either of those horses, but she actually follows them and monitors them. And I think that's the other part about this whole journey and what it is. There's so many people along a road that actually experience it and join in, if you like, and come along. Like if you have to do something to help someone with a certain foal, once you realise that that's a foal that won, it's a good little kick, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, at one stage I was taking 2 really good horses to the races, Astronaut and Garnet River. I trained them, I trained their mothers, and I trained their grandmothers. Well, you don't get much, and they both won derbies. I mean, you get pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things with the harness, and because people can train them, you can breed them, you can foal them down, you can actually drive them one day.
Wow.
In a race, you can have that whole. There's so many things you can have with the game.
Yeah, you can do the whole lot. The one thing about driving, though, is that I used to drive in the early days, but the horses got better and I didn't, so I gave away the driving.
There's 2 of us on the microphones now. Don't worry about that. So we're both happy with that one. So
yeah.
Yep. Hugh, thank you. Thank you very much to Harness Breeders too for making these possible and getting the message out there. Hopefully people have enjoyed it. If I had to ask you, I'm not going to ask you one because you probably give too many key points, but your top 3 key points when foaling a horse down or and getting a live foal out, what would you can I screw you down to 3? Or is that
absolutely. The first one is when you see her first lie on the ground and contract, you got to have a foal out in 30 minutes. The second one is the foal's got to be up and drinking in 4 to 6 hours. and really drinking. And the third thing is, after 24 hours, it's got to be following its mother, running around, fairly active.
Yep.
Okay? If all those things are normal, and the mare's on its feet and eating.
Yep.
If all those things are normal, you've probably got a happy ending.
Yep. Yep. But if one of those is missing,
if one of those is missing, you've got a
call for help.
Potential disaster, call for help.
Yep. Yep, and go from there. Hugh, thank you. You are on the board of Harness Breeders Victoria. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate Harness Breeders Victoria getting out to do these. I enjoy them. I think they're cool. We get to, breeding is cool. Brett Coffey has always said that, and breeding is cool, and we've got to remember it. And it's such a part of the journey. Foal numbers are dropping. We need to get more people involved in it, more people enjoying it. If you're not confident enough to foal a horse down in your backyard, and competent enough to do that, get them to an establishment, a stud, someone that has got great rapport with it, but still follow the journey and enjoy it, because it's a great lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. The whole business is fun. That's why we do it.
Hugh, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you.